Hi, my name is Coralie, and I'm going to be doing the reading response number 1 for the class LS111 at Fresno State. So let's get started. So we read 3 articles and have to respond to them. And so I figured that the best way to get started is to talk about like the main topics in each article. So the main topic in each article was literacy and reading. So the first article talked about young multilingual children and the different ways that they learn, and they learn to speak and write in their languages. The second article talked about a family that lived together, and a big thing for that article was like the importance of people in the learning environment for a child to learn literacy. And the third article spoke less about the children learning, like it did still talk about the children, and more about like the teachers' roles in children learning. So, combining the 3 articles to come up with one main idea throughout them, I would say is that each of them kind of said, there's not just one way to learn literacy and teach literacy. So the children in the first article all had different speeds in which they learned, and different methods to help them learn. So there was one child who, you could see that he was comprehending things by like his movement, his body movement. And there were some children that were just getting it and like responding well to the teacher reading to the children. So that article just kind of showed that when it comes to learning language, that there are different ways that children show that they're progressing in that. So I enjoyed reading about that. Let's see, the children in the second article are heavily influenced by the adults and children around them when it comes to learning. So it said that the parents are pretty like big on, spelling. The children need to spell correctly, have good handwriting kind of thing. But then also around them, the children in the house, they had cousins and siblings that would kind of encourage them to want to learn more, because like the older siblings would be encouraged to teach the children what they know and how they feel, and like what they feel that the younger kids should know. And the third article talks about the importance of the influence of teachers and their attitudes towards literacy. So the third article, I kind of want to take a little bit of time to kind of talk about my personal response to that article, because as I was reading it, I read that last. So the first 2 articles I read, and then the third article, as I was reading it, I was like, this is pretty far off from like what the first 2 articles talked about. And it did kind of bring it in at like near the end of the article, to kind of what the first 2 were about. But But yeah, it was a little bit different than the first two articles when it came to the topic. So I figured that it was more about, because it was from like the perspective of a teacher, so I figured it was more about like the role of the teacher. So I know I got off track. But a big point in that article that I came to understand was that the teacher's attitude toward writing influences, or the literacy in general, so reading and writing, but that the teacher's attitude influences the children's attitude towards it, which I think is very true and very fair, because whenever I'm not a huge science person, for example, but anytime I had a science teacher that was like really into it, I had a biology teacher a couple semesters ago who was really into his field of study, and he would get all giddy when he talked about it, and it just made me more inclined to listen, even though I personally don't really care too much about science. I wanted to listen because he was so excited about it, and his attitude towards it was positive. And so my attitude towards it kind of became a little bit more positive. So then, moving on, another good idea from all the articles is that people that surround a child in learning environment influences a child in their progress of learning. So I did kind of like talk about this, about the second article, the children that had family all around them, like they lived in like a 5-family household or whatever. So there's a 5-family household, and there's a lot of people living there. So there's a lot of aunts and uncles and parents and children, so cousins and siblings. All of those people in that household helped influence the progress of the children's learning. So the older cousins would play school with the younger cousins, and in that they would kind of give them assignments that would, help them in practicing for school, and in turn help progress a child's learning. Or the child's learning. And then they would also play games with like their nannies. And it would like challenge the children to come up with, they use the example, the kids played American Idol. And so they had 3 people be the judges, and then like the rest were contestants, and then one of them was a host. The rest were contestants, and they had to come up with like a song to sing. And so it challenged the one learning to read the lyrics and become familiar with the song. And so just those like influences in that household like helped the child's progression in learning, and like learning of literacy especially. And so the first article has the teachers and the other students as examples of influence on a child learning language. And so like sometimes the children respond better when they're communicating with other students. So communicating with other students, the teachers could see that like kids can switch languages to the language that the other child knows. And I thought that that was really cool and important, because with the multilingual children, you know, what language do they speak mostly? And the teachers noticed that the children spoke, when they were alone, like by themselves, they spoke like their native language, their home language, the language that they speak at home with their parents. But then they could like switch it up to English when talking to the teacher, or other students. And so I thought that that was super interesting and a good way to show that the other students influence the learning of language for those little kids, because that's the way that they can communicate with the teacher and the other students. The teachers also help influence the child's like literacy learning, because you know, they read to them, and they read in English, so it kind of helps them learn English, but they don't like hinder the children from speaking their home language. The teachers themselves are just encouraging, and they learn the different ways that the students learn best, and in turn help the children progress in their learning of literacy. So then, let's see. The third article talks more in depth of the teacher's influence. So I was talking about how the first article had teacher influence. Well, the third article talks a little bit more in depth about it. And again, how keeping an open mind as a teacher helps encourage students to learn which ways learn best for them. So the teacher can use different strategies and observe their kids to find out which of these ways is going to be the best way for that child to learn. And then they can take those and apply it, and the child can then progress further into their learning. Not just of literacy. I mean, this is specifically for literacy, but this is for anything. And that's something that I've kind of known about for a while, is that every child has a different way of learning. You kind of have to figure out especially with the ones that are struggling, which ways work best for the child, and then just kind of continue with that, but also, you know, keep trying new ways with a child. Maybe another way will work better than the one that was working before. So just never stop finding new ways to teach. And also, if a child comes up to you, this is kind of what the third article was talking about now. If a child comes up to you and tells you, hey, this is a good way. This is a good way to teach. Or this is the way that I learn. Or, you know, and you don't like put that into practice, then you could hinder like their ability to learn, because you're basically like ignoring them. And so that was an important thing to me, and a great example of how the people, teachers specifically, can help progress a student's learning so they can help progress a student's learning by taking their ways of learning and the ways that work best for that child and applying it. So for me personally, reading these articles kind of helped redefine literacy for me. Moving on. I, like many others, thought literacy was strictly reading and writing. And although it is reading and writing, there's more to it. It's speaking the way I am speaking now. It could have a lot to do with like body language, if that's like the way a child, you know, if that's like the way somebody communicates best is by using their body. That's a form of, you know, literacy. So before, it had never occurred to me how many other aspects of the world can be considered literature. But not only that, but after reading these articles, I kind of have a better understanding of the different ways that a child can learn. You know, with all the examples that were given, and especially in the first article, where they were talking about the children and their different ways of learning the languages. So it helps me get a better understanding of like what I could do in the future as a teacher to teach my children to learn. And there are several different ways that I can teach them. If one way is not working, I'll have to go to a different way. And then lastly, I want to say that although I enjoyed all of these articles, the one that stuck out the most to me would probably be the, I don't know, I think the first article with the children that are learning language, because it really speaks volumes to me about the way that children can learn and the role a teacher can play in the learning process for a child. So thank you for taking time to listen to me, and I'll see you for my next video.